Hey, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to be assembling the Excelsior Warpriest.
Excelsior!
Alright, so first up, let's take a look at the tools we'll be using. For starters, we've got a sharp knife, very sharp blade, don't cut yourself. We've got a pair of snips for getting our parts off the sprue. You can get really nice quality ones from hobby shops. These ones I just found in my toolbox. They're not good at all, but they do the job. This is a file, which sometimes you won't need depending on the type of model, but this is for getting rid of little mold lines and things like that, so it's a helpful tool to have. And finally, we've got super glue. Plastic glue will also work. I'll be using super glue today. Alright, so first things first, we gotta get in here. We have our knife. We just cut all the way around. So I guess this video will also be an unboxing, because I just unboxed it. The photo on the back is also your instructions, so you can follow that along as well. And here we go. So these are the contents of our package. We have a sprue, we've got our guy, we've got our Griffhound and all of his book and his hammers and his cape. So, pretty straightforward. And of course 2 bases. One for priest, one for his pet. And then, as I showed, on the one side is the label of the package, and on the other side is our instructions. So let's start assembling. First thing you gotta do, using your snips, is cut all the pieces off. And you do that by just going around, being careful not to clip the actual bits of the model itself. All you're doing is snipping off each individual piece. Now again, like I mentioned, how you can find better quality snips than this. That'll what they'll basically do is there's a sharper blade, so they'll cut and sort of see this little peg bit that's left off from the sprue. A better quality snip will be able to cut that much cleaner, but we're just going to use a knife to smooth that out later, so I'm not too concerned about it. So I'm just running all the way along the model. Now, a quick word of advice here. You know, this will be fine for a model of this size, but if you're putting together like a large model with lots of little parts, I'd advise not removing every single piece off the sprue immediately. I think I said this in a previous video, but basically every part on the sprue, if you actually, I don't know if you can make it out, but every part actually is numbered. And if you follow the instructions, you know, they'll take you step by step through which piece goes where. And if you've got like 100 pieces, it can get a little overwhelming and confusing if you've just snipped off everything, you don't know what number is everything. Especially if you're working on a piece where there might be a lot of pieces that kind of look similar. For this piece, it's fairly straightforward, and I think I'm familiar enough with human anatomy that I'll remember that his head doesn't go where his arm goes. Unless maybe you're making this into a Chaos Excelsior Priest, in which case, you know, you could put the Griffhound's head on his head. What would that be? So I just snip out his little book. There we go. And there's his head, top of the head, side of his head. His hammer. And those are all your pieces, so you're left with an empty sprue, and you can chuck that in the garbage. So our next step now is, like I said before, you want to get rid of these little extra bits that are left over from the sprue. For that, we're going to use our knife. You can also use a file depending on how much they're sticking out. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to do it. Don't cut yourself, obviously. The blade on here is extremely sharp, so what I basically do to make it safe is my right thumb here, goes right at the point of the blade that is going to be touching the model. So basically, to move the knife, I'm basically just sliding my thumb over. And I'm not putting pressure. What I'm actually doing is, if I find there's some resistance, I just rock back and forth like this, and the piece just comes off. You see that? It just comes off like butter. And this way, you can get it off and get it nice and smooth. And I'm basically sort of just smoothing it out. And then once it feels smooth, then it's ready. So like that. But what I don't want you to do is push into it, because what you don't want to happen is the blade to kick forward and then go into your other finger, and then there's blood, and it's just not a necessary thing. I find you don't need to press hard at all with models like this, plastic models that is, because the plastic is no match for a metal blade. And I'm giving you the same advice. I actually have a video putting together the Orc War Chanter, and I'm giving you the same advice because maybe you haven't seen that video, but it's also important that you not cut yourself. Oh, it's just filling there. Alright, so what I do basically, as you can see, I've put a pile, all the parts are here in a pile, and then what I do is I take a piece, remove all the bits, put it over here, and then I move on to the next piece, so that what you end up with is, at the end, when this pile's empty, you know you've got everywhere. So this is the Griffhound. Getting off the little bits on the bottom of his paws. Again, just pushing with my thumb. Very, very little pressure, because I don't want my hands to become sliced. There's a slight one on the top of his tail. There we go. Better down the top of his head there. Yeah, there is. Go. Here's his torso. And looks like there are 2 points there, and then underneath his feet here. And then a third piece here. There we go. Next, we've got the next half of the Griffhound. That off so it's smooth. And there's a bit on the top of his head. Go. Next up we've got a hammer. Again, same deal, we're just pushing. Very little pressure required. Like so. Good. And there's a tiny little nub here on the top of his wrist. Same deal. Rocking back and forth slightly. Like that. There we go. That's all for that piece. Yep. Next hammer. Looks like there's a little bit on the very end of the handle. Should be good. Next, got this piece. So you just, pop it off and then give it a quick touch with your thumb to see if it's smooth. And if it's smooth to the touch, it means that you'll be able to paint right over it and there'll be no evidence that it was there. Go. Looks like 2 more bits. We've got his book. The 2 corners. And there's a little bit on the wrist area. Excellent. Final piece. His head. So we've got a little bit underneath the neck here. Pop it off. And on the very top of his head. So now here the only thing I gotta make sure of is obviously at the top of his head you want it to be smooth. So you just sort of gotta be really careful. You're kind of, as you're removing this little bit, you're kind of carving the top of his head, like you're deciding what the shape will be a little bit. So you just sort of shave the bits off little by little. I think that should do it. Yeah, looks around. Lovely. Great. Now just to quickly check the bases to see the bases look pretty okay. Yeah. All right. Next, so I've gone through my pile, all my bits. Next, I've got my file, and again, this model has very little in terms of mold lines, but there are a few slightly raised areas just on the side of him here. So again, you just take your file and go over them lightly. It's especially important in areas of skin, because most people don't have lines up the sides of their bodies. So yeah, you just sort of give it a quick, go over it quickly, and just a little bit there, a little bit there. That should be okay for that. I don't know if the other areas really had it. So a little bit on the cape here, but it's pretty good actually. And I think the rest of the parts, there's not much. So there's not much to do. I mean, it depends on the model and how intricate the parts are, and also older models tend to be worse for the mold lines. I guess they've just gotten better at it as the technology has improved. So that's all I'll be doing for the file. So now we're moving on to assembly. For assembly, we have our super glue. You can use any brand, but this is the one I have. It's almost done and it's been through a lot. Now, one thing that I'm gonna do, or rather not do, is, so this is his cape here, and it attaches here, but I'm not actually going to glue that on today, and the reason for that is because I want to be able to paint the detail behind and I guess underneath the cape as well. So what I'll do is I'll assemble everything else, but not glue the cape in place. So the first piece I think I'll glue on is this here. This attaches here. You can see there's a hole at his back. This kind of fills it in, like so. And so take our glue. Now you want to use very, very little glue here. So what I do is, you can see how I'm squeezing a little bit out, but I'm not really pouring the glue on as much as I'm sort of dabbing the drop on and kind of just very lightly coating the parts that I'm gluing on. So you're not like pouring the glue onto the model. You want very little. I might even put a bit too much, so I just rubbed it off with my fingers there. And put it in there. Hold it in place for a few seconds. Blow on it. And there's your back piece. Very cool. And again, the cape will actually cover that. Which, you know, do you really need to paint it? But it'll be a lot easier to paint the whole area under there if I not glue it on yet. So we'll leave that aside. So the next thing I'll do is, I think I'm going to attach him to his base. So again, very small amount on the bottom of his feet. Grab his base. And you sort of just, you know, find a point that you're happy with. Hold it in place. And models like this, where the feet are perfectly flat, they'll stand on their own pretty easily. So, you know, I can just sort of stick the body on there and then leave it there to dry. In the meantime, we can go back to the cape part, where his head actually attaches to the cape. So you can see there's a little, on the bottom of his neck there's like a little nub there, and there's a little groove where it goes, so that's where you're putting it. So I'm just going to dab a bit of glue into that hole and put the two together. So now the glue is starting to adhere. So you can kind of move it around a little bit, but until you've found a spot that looks natural. That looks right. And if you stick it in and it kind of doesn't look like it's sitting properly at this point, the glue is still wet, so you can still adjust things, but I think that looks correct. Yeah. And if you grab his body, yeah, that looks fine. Like so. Great. So now we can put that aside. Next, we're attaching all the little body parts. So we can start with his right hand, going onto its right arm. So same deal. Very tiny little dab of glue. You don't need a lot here. Just coat the part you want, and then you just bring them together. And you just hold it there for 20 or 30 seconds, and as long as it needs to adhere. And you just sort of check it to make sure it makes, anatomical sense, which it looks like it does. Arm into the right hand. Lovely. Next up, we'll do his left hand, which is holding the book. Now, the thing that's cool about this is you'll actually be able to, paint text or pictures or whatever you want that he's looking at. And that's gonna go like that in his hand, so. Again, I'll just dab a little bit of glue. A little goes a long way here. And you find the point. And you just sort of hold it in place. And again, if you use very little glue, you'll find that it dries a lot faster, so it'll grip quicker. So there you go. Holding his book. Next up, we've got this tiny hammer, which just goes on the side of his body. It's like a sidearm, and you can see that little hole there, and then on the side of him there's that little nub. That's where that goes. So again, a tiny little drop of glue into that hole. And then you just bring the two pieces together. You just hold it there. And I probably won't leave you watching me hold it there for the entire 20 seconds. I might just edit and dissolve to get ahead, but we'll see. There we go. I guess maybe I didn't need to. So those are all his bits. So now all that's left is his little pet. There's not much to the Gryph-hound. He's just two halves. So again, very light squeeze, and all you're doing is coating it. So you don't want to pour the glue out onto the model here. You're just sort of basically squeezing a little bit out at the end and then sort of coating the area you want. And then just slap them together. Just squeeze them. That appears to make sense. Watch for any excess. That's what I'm doing there. I'm just getting rid of any bits that squeeze out. I'm not terribly concerned about getting glue on my hands. If you get some glue on your fingers, I just sort of go like that quickly and it'll make it dry fast. If you have a glob on your hand and then just go like that, then you glue your fingers together. And then you'll be stuck like that for the rest of your life. So make sure you go like this to quickly dry it. And finally, a few quick dabs on the bottom of his paws. And position him on the base. And again, he's quite a straight standing creature, so I don't have to hold it in place while he dries. I can just sort of find a spot where I want him to sit, and there he'll stay. So there you have it, guys. There is our Excelsior Warpriest and his trusty Gryph-hound Sparky, ready to be painted. So again, his head and cape are not glued on because I want to make painting easier. But he sits on there nicely so you can see what the final model looks like. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. Like and subscribe for more videos, and we'll see you next time.